The universe into which you are emerging. The Allies of Humanity Book 2 by Marshall Summers. First briefing. We give greetings. We are very pleased to have this opportunity to speak with you once again and to provide the information that we are about to impart. We understand that our first series of commentaries has generated much interest, many questions, and perhaps some confusion as well. We hope in this second volume then to provide more insight for you, to address some of these questions, if they can be answered, and to provide for you a window into the greater universe in which you live so that you may see beyond the confines of your own world into the reality of life in the greater community. This is a necessary part of your education now, for your world is emerging into a greater community of intelligent life, a greater community in which you have always lived. We have been sent to provide a series of briefings to help prepare humanity for this great threshold. Included in this are our observations of extraterrestrial intervention that is occurring in the world today, why this intervention is occurring, how it is being carried out, and how it can be offset and prevented for your own well-being. This requires that you learn about life in the greater community so that you may become properly oriented to do this new and far greater reality into which you are emerging. Your ability to recognize the truth of what we are about to impart is absolutely fundamental for your survival, for your advancement, and indeed, for the preservation of the very freedoms that you hold most dear. For the greater community into which you are emerging is perhaps far different from what you may have thought before. We have been sent to represent the Allies of Humanity. We are their representatives. We are not in your world, but have been observing your world from a hidden location nearby. We have not come to establish ourselves here, to build relations with the human family, or to establish an economic or political liaison with your governments. We have come instead with a very simple mission. Our mission is to observe the extraterrestrial intervention that is occurring in your world today. And given the opportunity to do so, provide the commentary that you will need to understand and to offset this intervention, and to prepare for the realities of life in the universe. Our first series of briefings provided a general view of the intervention, how it is being carried out, and what people must come to understand in order to avoid its influence and its persuasion and to recognize its reality. And yet there are more things that you must learn regarding this, in order to gain the eyes to see and to understand these things for yourself. Though this may all seem strange and new to you, it is but another demonstration of nature that you understand and comprehend within your own realm. Nearly everything we are about to impart to you and that we have imparted already can be understood from your experience of nature. That is why the extraterrestrial intervention is not a mystery. It is a demonstration of nature. Its difficulty, however, is that it casts you in a different role that you are used to. For you are used to being pre-eminent in your own world. You are used to feeling that you have the great evolutionary advantage within your own realm. But within the greater community, you do not have this pre-eminence or this advantage. And so, you must gain greater skill and a greater cooperation amongst you. This is both a great difficulty and a great opportunity for your race. For it is perhaps only the overshadowing of the greater community and the difficulties that it will confront you with that will enable humanity to unite and to find its common ground. Whether this can be accomplished remains to be seen, but the challenge is upon you, and the challenge confronts the life and the future of every person living in the world today. At one moment, this may seem strange and incomprehensible. And yet in the next month, you can understand that this is nature being carried out. You possess resources and an environment that are valued by others, who seek to use and to have these things for themselves. It is your environment that they want. It is your help that they need. They do not seek to destroy you, but to have you become part of their collective in service to them. This must be said many times in many different ways, so that you can gain a very clear understanding. As we have said, this is not a mystery. It is but a presentation of your life in the greater community. It is the reality of nature, which you yourself can understand. Yet you are in a different position now, and this requires strength, discernment, and cooperation, and a certain kind of sobriety regarding your understanding of the nature of life in the universe. In this, our second set of briefings, we wish to give you a greater understanding and a greater vision of what this life is really like in the universe around you. It is not merely a matter of perspective. Our range of experience in these matters is very great amongst us. We have our own unique perspectives, but there are certain realities that are obvious to us, for we are in a position to recognize them and to see them. We have lived through the opportunities and the difficulties of these realities. All things that you have yet to experience for yourselves, and yet your allies abroad wish to save you from the great risks that you now face. Risks of emerging into the greater community, and the need to preserve your freedom and your integrity as a race as you undergo this difficult and prolonged transition. This is the greatest challenge that any race in the universe will ever face, and its consequences will be lasting and far-reaching. And yet there are great forces for good in the universe, forces that work on behalf of individual freedom and the integrity of all life, forces that seek to nurture and to keep alive the greater spiritual knowledge that resides as a potential within all sentient beings. Your allies represent but a small expression of this greater force. For wherever there is life, there is the integrity of this spiritual knowledge. It is not merely information, it is a living presence. We wish to demonstrate the reality and the meaning of this knowledge and why it is so very fundamental to your success in healing the wounds of your world, and in meeting the one great challenge that can unite and uplift humanity. The universe is full of life, but the universe is immense, and intelligent life living in the physical manifestation is scattered about a great and vast arena. It is concentrated in some places more than others. In some ways, it resembles the maps of your countries, where there are large areas where many human people are congregated, and there are areas where very few people live at all. Between these areas of great congregation, there are roads, great roads that are heavily traveled. In sparsely populated areas, there are very few roads, many of which are rarely, if ever, traveled. We want to give you this analogy of the dispersal of intelligent life in this galaxy. We have never ventured beyond the galaxy, so we cannot speak of the other possibilities. Yet within this galaxy alone, there is such a diversity of life. We ourselves have only seen a very, very small part of it, for the galaxy is very great. Your world exists in an area of congregation, an area that has many inhabited worlds. You do not see this within your own solar system, but beyond your solar system, this is most certainly true. You do not live in a sparsely populated part of the universe. You do not live in a region that is uncharted and unknown to others. This gives you certain disadvantages because your world is being scrutinized by many powerful forces. They are seeking an intervention now because humanity has reached a point in its development where it has built the infrastructure that other races believe that they can use for themselves. This is why the intervention did not happen at an earlier time. It was allowed for humanity to build the resources and the infrastructure first. In other words, you did the work for those who believe that you will serve them in the future. Therefore, you do not live in a distant and remote part of the galaxy. This you must understood. Travel in space occurs along certain routes or avenue, just like in your world. Certain roads are heavily traveled, others are rarely traveled. Your world exists in an area of considerable travel, which means there are many races using these routes for commerce and trade. Here, there are several emerging races such as your own, all being carefully watched by others. As we have said in our previous discourses, the greater community into which you are emerging is a competitive environment on a scale you can hardly imagine. Trade and competition for resources, for alliances, and for worlds that have strategic value are considerable. And yet the situation is far more complex than it might seem at first. Conquest of other lands is not tolerated in well-inhabited areas. Because of the competitive environment, there are restraints. Rules have been established over a long period of time in how trade will be conducted and what rules and guidelines will be followed. The violation of these rules brings retribution from one's adversary and competitors, and so there is a system of checks and balances. This system is generally obeyed, but as is so often the case, exceptions are sought in many different ways. It is important for you to know that it is not allowed for your world to be invaded. Militarily speaking, the forces that are intervening in your world are not strong military forces. They are commercial forces. We call them collectives. And you will have an opportunity in this second set of discourses to learn more about their nature and structure. In order for economic powers to gain access to your world and to gain control of your world, they must use more subtle means of persuasion, means of inducement. They must have you desire them to be here, to welcome them, to want what they have to offer, to seek their assistance and their initial offerings. They want you to believe that you need them and that without them you cannot succeed. In this way, they satisfy the restraints that are placed upon them. In this way, they can gain control of your world according to the rules that have been established. The persuasion and the inducement that will be placed upon your world are very powerful and very compelling. Many people, by their own inclinations and by the weakness of their own position in life, will be very attracted to this persuasion. And yet, it is but a deception. It is a seduction. Then, seemingly with humanity's general approval, the intervention can begin and can be fulfilled without violating any restrictions that prevent invasion, conquest, and so forth. If your world exists in a very remote or uncharted area, an area where these kinds of rules of trade and conduct had not been established, then military conquest would be attempted, for there would be nothing to prevent it from happening. But those who seek to take advantage of this world do not engage in military conquest. They do not need to. It is not their emphasis. It is not their purpose. They are not organized to do this. They rely upon your weakness, as you must learn to rely upon your strength. They rely upon your lack of confidence in the human spirit, as you must learn to rely upon this spirit within yourself. Their presence here holds great dangers for humanity, and great opportunities if humanity can respond responsibly and wisely. Therefore, it is our desire and our intention to help you in this preparation by giving you a perspective and an orientation to the reality that you are now facing, and that you will face continuously from this time forward. For there is no returning to your former isolated state. Now you must learn to value and to protect your freedom, to consolidate your freedom, and to build your freedom in an environment where that freedom will be under constant challenge. Only a world that is strong and united and wise in its dealings with the greater community can maintain its autonomy and remain free in the universe. This is true of all free worlds, whether they exist in areas of congregation or whether they exist in remote areas that are rarely visited. This is nature, because other worlds have created greater levels of technology does not change the realities of life. It only makes the interactions between worlds more complicated and often more difficult to discern. It is easier to recognize a military confrontation than it is to recognize the hidden intention of those who come seeming to bear gifts and answers and the marvels of technology. Humanity is without education regarding the greater community, and that is why you are so vulnerable. Humanity is divided amongst its nation and its cultures, and that is why you are so vulnerable. Your dispositions and your religious beliefs cannot prepare you adequately for what faces you now. In the greater community, there are many races who have achieved very high levels in their spiritual understanding and have achieved a state of freedom that humanity has not yet come even close to achieving. Unlike those who are visiting you, these societies do not involve themselves in interplanetary trade to a very great degree, if at all. They are not involved in exploration. They are not resources explorers. They do not seek to gain alliances for political and economic advantage, except in certain situations for their own defense. They do not exploit other worlds. They do not seek to seduce young races who are emerging into the greater community. They do not engage in war. They are not part of collectives. Your allies, whom we represent, demonstrate this establishment, the establishment of free races. This freedom is very difficult to achieve and to maintain in the universe. To function successfully in the greater community, you must be self-sufficient. You must be united, and you must be very discreet. Do you see these qualities demonstrated in the human family at this time? Are they demonstrated within you and in your relationships? We are imparting to you a greater wisdom, a wisdom that has been difficult for us to achieve, that we have achieved at great cost. Our ability to be here to assist humanity is a demonstration of this achievement, for unlike those intervening in your world at this time, we seek only to observe and to advise. Once our transmissions are complete, we will have to withdraw for our own safety, for we are here without any official permission from trading authorities, overseeing organizations, anything like this. If those who are intervening in your world were to discover us, we would surely perish. With the presentation of our first set of discourses, our own safety now is imperiled. Soon, those races who are intervening in your world will begin a search of your solar system for us. Therefore, we must impart this information and then withdraw to a point far beyond your world, to a place where we can no longer observe the intervention directly. That is why we must give this information to you now. That is why you must seek to learn it and to use it to the very best of your ability. For once we depart, there can be no further direct assistance to you. That is why we give these briefings the greatest importance. That is why you must receive them and recognize them to be such. We will provide to you what you need to know regarding the nature of the collectives, how they function, why they are here, and what they are doing in the world. We will give you an overview of the realities of intelligent life in the universe and how interactions actually do occur. We shall give you a perspective on the strategic importance of your world and where it stands in relation to other inhabited worlds in your proximity. We shall also speak of the greater spiritual powers that exist in the universe and within the human family. Your isolation is now over. You will never have it again in the ways that you have known it previously. Therefore, listen carefully to all the things we are about to tell you.